Nanking, the capital of the Republic of China, is a city long celebrated as one of China's greatest literary, artistic, and political centers, a city that served as the ancient capital of China for extended periods of time. It was in Nanking that the canons of Chinese calligraphy and painting were set, that the four-tone system of the Chinese language was established. It was in Nanking in 1842 that the treaty ending the Opium Wars was signed, opening China to foreign trade. And it was in Nanking in 1911 that the nationalist leader Sun Yat-sen became the first provisional president of this current Republic of China. When fighting broke out between Chinese and Japanese forces in Shanghai in early August, it forced the Nanking government to ready itself for possible enemy attacks elsewhere. Chinese officials not only held practice air raid drills in the city, but ordered residents to camouflage their houses and create bomb shelters. On August 15th, while Shanghai was still being besieged, Nanking experienced its first aerial bombardment in history. For the next few months, Nanking would endure dozens of Japanese air raids, forcing residents to hide in basements, trenches, and dugouts in the ground. Japanese pilots bombed the capital indiscriminately, hitting schools, hospitals, power plants, and government buildings, prompting thousands of people, both rich and poor, to flee the city. As the situation became more dangerous, the leader of the Republic of China's army, Chiang Kai-shek, ordered most government officials to move out of Nanking. Within days, official-looking cars packed with luggage clogged the streets. Then, just as quickly, such cars disappeared altogether. Buses and rickshaws also left with the departing government officials, leaving the city of Nanking with no public transportation. Many other Chinese civilians who had the means to also took flight during this time. And then, in mid-November, 50,000 Chinese troops arrived. Coming from upriver ports, they first unloaded tons of weapons and ammunition, and then started to occupy empty government buildings of their choosing. By December, an estimated 90,000 Chinese troops populated the Nanking area. Many residents of Nanking remained in the city through much of November, some choosing to take a wait-and-see attitude, others staying because they were too old or too poor to do anything else. For them, November brought consistently bad news. The battle was not going well in Shanghai. Long files of Chinese soldiers were returning from the battlefront, exhausted, wounded, and demoralized, marching in grim silence. Those who could took solace from the fact that new units of heavily armed troops could be seen marching through the streets to the docks, where they boarded junks on their way to the battlefront. Obviously, the fight was not over. Through rain and howling wind, small modern Chinese tanks rumbled from the capital toward Shanghai, next to lines of pack mules weighed down with supplies. Late November, the dreaded news finally reached Nanking. Shanghai had fallen. More than 200,000 Japanese troops now stood between the ocean and the capital, while some 700,000 Chinese troops fell back in retreat. They brought the news no one wanted to hear. With Shanghai in ruins, the Japanese were now headed for Nanking. The loss of Shanghai came as a blow to Chiang Kai-shek. Faced with the loss of China's largest metropolis, Chiang tried to resolve a difficult dilemma, whether to defend Nanking against the Japanese or move the capital to safer ground. In the end, he decided to do both. But rather than stay and defend Nanking himself, he shifted the burden to someone else, his subordinate, Tang Shen-chi. The decision to entrust Tang with the defense of Nanking made big news. On November 27th, Tang gave a press conference to boost morale. Before reporters, he delivered a rousing speech, vowing to live or die with Nanking. The speech was so passionate that when it ended, reporters gave him a huge round of applause. With more soldiers still pouring into Nanking, the city began to make its final preparation